Or perhaps you want to introduce yourself for a bit before your sharing?
Yes, I will do that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, wait, I just need to have my slides open and everything. So my name is Clarissa. I am currently a lecturer at Malaysian Institute of Art, teaching interior architecture with their new bachelor program, as well as what else am I? I am also running a research project on creative hubs, or what I prefer to call is art and cultural kind of initiatives, and I'm also part of a collective, half of a collective called Inventory, where we're running another research project called A Goods Log, but I'll elaborate a little bit more about that when it comes to at the end, when Joey said that I can show my stuff and take the opportunity. But,
yes, you can.
Yeah, thank you. So I titled this talk Commune, Collective, and Community to ponder and surmise my journey through home. Home is a sentimental word for me. It entails different places, and it exists as a multi-layered entity. It goes beyond the simple conception of space. The terminologies commune, collective, and community have accompanied me through this journey. The differences and similarities between these three words sit in a state of fluidity, quite like my work and my research and how it has changed. The position of these three characteristics throughout my time, and of course, complicating those ideas and translating it between places, their ethnography, theory, history, and all underpinning the stake of design. So I begin with this post-it note. I wrote it in a hurry. Can you guys see my messy handwriting? It writes like how to define a community. So yeah, you can also write your responses in the chat. I also would like to see. Yeah, I'm also aggregating all of these disparate ideas about it. So this was 2016 when I finished my 8 months at the Urban Ecologies Design Lab just last week, and I was starting university in a new place, not a new place, but with a new cohort. And I participated in the architecture studio community. I was in Hong Kong. I spoke Cantonese more than I spoke English at that point. I grew up in a city bounded by literally 50 years of post-colonial hangover. So I will also quote my favorite tutor, Christiana Lange, for some notes on community, togetherness, and collective. The call for togetherness has found a renaissance in the past 10 years. Not long ago, individualism was a key buzzword, but today we're confronted with the Occupy movements, with slogan calling for a common city, the rise of shared economies, and the increased development of collective housing and communal living arrangements. These phenomena can be seen as indicators and paradigm shifts within today's new liberal society. But what is changing and why? Who is behind these changes? And how do these forces for change eventually coalesce into a need to be together? So today I will explore a facet of my journey until now. I'll speak primarily about my MArch design studio, which is this idea of co-living and new ways of living, in tandem with my elective, which I've titled my talk after, exploring semiotics theory and the processes of the collective, and also my work sandwiched with the Urban Ecologies Design Lab, UEDL. And maybe I'll share a little bit at the end about my research about creative hubs, because that is also another form of the collective, and also which feeds into my interdisciplinary elective that I taught at Malaysian Institute of Art, and also a little bit about my next steps. So setting up the backdrop, our studio was started up as a space of constant discussion, a co-lab. The projects we created changed week by week, as if it's a growing machine that exists beyond a solution by a set of possibilities. We were set out with using post-its. Each color kind of represented an aspect. Maybe research, theory, examples, proposals for one of the colors. We began with creating a repository of co-living environments to extract the schemes of international perspectives of what living is to be. Another backdrop is to examine the etymology of living. The etymology of living relates to the relationship between living, ecology, and economy. Originating from the ancient Greek word oikos, living refers to not only to the physical act of dwelling, but also to the way of living. It inhabits the concepts of household, ownership, property, and of family, while combining the meaning of oikology, which ecology translates to ecology, and oikonomy, which is now economy of living. Throughout history, these relationships have evolved and grown into diverse socio-political environments and other ways and means of living. So, yeah, it goes back to this quote: ecology is not the science of nature, but the thinking, the logos about how we kind of live together. So we were arming ourselves with the kind of vocabulary to engage with the simple act of living and asked to intersect these ideas with architecture. We are tasked with positioning amongst the multiplicities of possibilities and to find agency in the context of Hong Kong. So as I said, each week we had to pitch a new scheme, how we are engaging with this idea of co-living, which entails a proposal on collective living, living togetherness, juxtaposed with dealing with the dense condition of the overpriced land in Hong Kong. This was 2016. The rise of co-living, co-working trend was at its peak. We began with a global scan of collective living. Airbnb was entrenched with the same value systems. Everywhere was beginning to share the same design ideals, and thus a photocopy model of a larger company like perhaps WeWork, and seemed like a viable solution to generate value through upscale pod housing solutions, or to simply spend a little bit more on the communal to get away with less of the private. Of course, co-working is only for one niche market. Whereas the realities of Hong Kong, we can look more closely at it. This was a series done by Benny Lam, commissioned by SOCO, which is an NGO titled Society for Community Organization. This is an invisible phenomenon that cannot be tabulated due to the density of Hong Kong. Studies have shown that anywhere between 200,000 to 500,000 people live in such precarity. The density of Hong Kong also compounds the effectiveness of this invisibility. In 2014, with 6,690 persons per square kilometer, is the kind of density of Hong Kong on an average. But mind you, Hong Kong is only about 24-25% of the land is built due to perhaps the 40% designated for country parks, and the rest is simply just too steep to develop sustainably on. And Hong Kong, oh yeah, you can kind of see the built area versus the kind of just forestry or just incredibly steep landscape that we have. And we have many hiking trails, so please come visit. And Hong Kong is also living on borrowed time. So I asked the questions to see the possibilities. These two ideas were shared by my other classmates because during the process of pitching every week, we were asked to also comment on other people's work. A kind of a form of co-equality and how to deal with this idea of like segregation / inclusion. Hong Kong, and in actuality most kind of urban cities, has one of the largest kind of wealth gaps disparities. And even through public housing, even though public housing is used widely, but for some reason is always cited as a successful case, it's incredibly difficult to sign up for. And the waiting list has been 3 to 5 years, and it shifts year on year. The invisible people live in between the paperwork, either making a little bit too much income or just not simply permanent resident yet, like just slip in between all of these kind of regulations and rules. So week after week, pitch after pitch, my scheme was reduced to the kind of like the private space, a singularly customizable space to a unit, a bed. I don't wish to go into too much detail about my design because I'm going to shift towards what my work with Urban Ecologies Design Lab. But what I wish to kind of come to terms with or explore or talk about is about the parameters which was set up by my speculative scheme. So a space for amenities, which are collectively determined through co-housing models, which are kind of modeled after Spearfield in Berlin or Sargfabrik in Vienna. Sargfabrik actually means coffin factory. It was located in an old coffin factory, where decisions are collectively made. Co-ops are implemented throughout the shared space. To a speculative kind of aggregation of units, as I kind of shown here, to reimagine the possible divide between private and shared spaces. the use of brownfield sites where redevelopment or in between development spaces, such as those which are slated for urban renewal, but wasn't really going to happen for the next 3 to 5 years. So use one of those kind of spaces. And community in this particular case, where the people who were going to live in this speculative model. So this was kind of like my final drawing, where the blue was the private, and you could see that they could kind of change it up, and the red was the collectively determined amenity space. But that's not so important. But what is more important is that a few years later, I was a research assistant at the Urban Ecologies Design Lab with John Du. She's the Associate Dean of Hong Kong U. I assisted with some project management and documentation of a co-housing module project, which was also run by SOCO, Society of Community Organization, which was put in an in-between space in an industrial building, which was slated for redevelopment in 2 or 3 years' time, and was left empty. So SOCO acquired the permission to redevelop the space and turned 4 of these particular units into a total of 24 individual modules. So there are 6 units in each of these spaces. The project was for male residents. So the community here were male residents with kind of complex homelessness conditions who require in-between housing for a few months up to a year. The modules are prefabricated aluminum components and steel paneling with shared eating and shower spaces and kitchenette spaces. So it was almost as if seeing my parameters that I imagined from my kind of co-housing studio project come to some sort of fruition, but not exactly. But there was a lot of mediation between the stakeholders. I had to liaise between my professor of my research unit, the social workers, my 2 colleagues who were directing the fabrication of the modules, the contractor who infilled the interior treatment of the spaces, and many more kind of people. The stake of design emerges as a tool to enable shared spaces to be utilized, but also enough visual privacy to allow tenants to have their own spaces. And most of the community that we were engaging had none before. Architecture here was empowering the community, in particular the male homeless, with a right to what was lost, the right to live, and providing a space of gathering, togetherness. I watched the residents themselves slowly build this project, because some of them also helped with building it, because it's actually quite simple, the tools of prefabrication. And yeah, it was constructed in 2 weeks. So the beauty is actually not the design itself, but the possibility that this project can be built and dismantled, overlaid with some kind of like social rules, which were assisted by the social workers, because they're the one who are managing the space after we leave the space, and the programs that they do to kind of provide 24 men who have the space to be housed for a year. They were also allowed to use the space liberally, because in Hong Kong, in these kind of homeless spaces, they are not allowed to stay there during the daytime. They're only allowed to live there during the night. So this is different, because they are allowed to have like their own kind of space. So before this project manifested, I'll shift to another project that I kind of helped before my master's and after my master's. It's a bit complicated. But it was part of a larger research titled Project Home Improvement, which began in 2015, and it's still ongoing today. Our research discovered that, as I said before, an estimated 200,000 to 500,000 people lived in units which are created for subdividing apartments. I'm sure some people have lived in one before, because I've actually seen them in KL as well, but they may be more forgiving. So let me know. But this exhibition was showing a series of home improvement projects that were created between 2015 and 2017, engaging with over 20 families. It was ran as an elective within our university, the University of Hong Kong, for final year bachelor students and master students. We had kind of vertical electives. The process, this is the kind of exhibition pamphlet. The process has 6 steps: research, consultation, co-design, fabrication, installation, evaluation, and evaluation. despite it is summarized into seemingly simple stages, each kind of bleed into one another, and it is incredibly arduous to kind of stick to those specific steps. So I was managing the course and documenting the process with the students of the elective. So what I did is like talk to all the stakeholders again, like much similar to the previous project. I was managing the project, not designing it. The research and consultation usually occurred hand in hand. This included multiple site visits and an intense drawing process, learning about like the family structure. When engaging with such marginalized groups, we had to learn how to speak to them. So when we visited them, there was always kind of a social worker with us. So the guy in orange was from Caritas. He was a social worker. He was here with us at each time. And we also had to speak with them in mostly Chinese or Cantonese. We weren't allowed to, in university, we enjoy mixing English and Cantonese, a little bit like how we speak in Rojak here, into even as our curriculum is mostly in English, right? Like we can't translate prefabricated modular units into Chinese. We weren't also allowed to ask how much longer they were going to stay in these current units. And as every day, most of them live in anticipation for displacement. The residents were also only free like 1 day per week, and we had to meet them with a social worker present, as I've said. As facilitators of the course, I had to manage everyone's time, everyone's expectations, to document the work the students were doing, and to ensure that they were giving like high quality furniture to these marginalized communities. Yeah, the spaces that they lived in were tight and definitely not meant for some sort of togetherness. Students were tasked to draw every single detail and tasked to create models which were easily understood by the public, meaning a documentation and representation of every object within these tight spaces. The design was collaborative and customized for the specific domestic realm for each group. And each group ventured to tabulate, react, and discover where the specific problems lie. So furthermore, code design was done mostly on informal kind of channels, such as WhatsApp, where most communication happens anyway on a daily basis in Hong Kong. So in terms of fabrication, oh yeah, this is another example before I move on to fabrication of the kind of drawings that we were doing in the studio. So this is kind of like a before and after, side by side. So yeah, in terms of fabrication, these 2 years we chose to use a bamboo laminate and CNC fabrication technology to ensure easy assembly, kind of duplication, and also dismantling. UEDL, which is Urban Ecologies Design Lab, provided the material choice and the fabrication assistance by guiding the students through wood fabrication techniques, CNC joinery and finishing as well. So for example, things like that. The residents lived in walk-up tenement buildings, which are shown before, and they're up to 7 stories tall, and the students had to bring each and every single piece up and down the stairs, and to make sure it fit through all the doorways and everything, to kind of install these pieces. To build on site, I documented all the reactions and interactions and somehow had to stay out of the way during these kind of like really difficult, dense, tight spaces. So I was tasked to also speaking to the aunties and uncles who were just like there standing, waiting for them while the students were tirelessly trying to put up their pieces, which took up a lot of time. Sometimes it went up to 4 to 5 hours to ensure the pieces are properly installed for everyday use. So the furniture was site-specific and transformable, and engaging with the awkward plans of these kind of subdivided units. The students shouldered the responsibility to ensure the residents also knew how to operate these pieces, how to dismantle, and how to put together, just in case they ever had to leave, and they probably will leave these spaces. And for example, this one, it's like a triangle corner underneath a huge beam. The furniture was messy, and the research is messy and complicated and tiring, and a lot of expectations had to be balanced. It's never a mechanized system that we can like one day turn out 100 solutions and every engagement, discussion, drawing accumulates to months of work to finally result in a singular kind of furniture outcome. When your home, a space of togetherness, the economy of living, and the politics is already a contested space, a space of discomfort, a space that is uncertain, and the stake of design is here attempting to kind of transact value to improve the domestic space. Low-income housing or households should be given like the best possible solution and high-quality design rather than what we kind of know to be like cheap and unaffordable furniture. Yeah, this simply breaks down in a few months. Throughout this elective, UEDL aims to intervene these invisible financial, social, and spatial networks outside the formal housing systems of Hong Kong, and to highlight that a simple policy solution is not enough because it ties into so much more than that, especially if they live in between the policies. Oh, I was supposed to say all that with this blank slide. But anyway, what do I have next? Oh yeah, so now let's speak a bit about what I'm doing. Coinciding with my research, I've also led an interdisciplinary studio on collective as a notion, the idea of a creative hub. Students were asked to pitch, program, and design creative hubs in the context of KL. Creative hubs are an art and cultural collective that exists as a physical, transient, or kind of like an online space. You can read more about my journey once my research project's fully launched for public next year, but keep a lookout for my directory that should be dropping soon, as the cool kids say, probably next month. But yeah, this is like the kind of work we went to a lot of spaces, and also I put together a website. So if you want it, I can share that with you, some of y'all. I also am one half of Inventory Projects. We are currently running a research project on informal object collections, archives, and transactions, and looking at these practices in Hong Kong. And we will come up with a series of short films to kind of document their work. Recently, I gave a symposium talk in Hong Kong Studies Symposium and online about migrational objects, so objects which were made in Hong Kong, moved away, were shipped abroad because Hong Kong was a light manufacturing industry space. And then somehow these people decided that it's important to bring it back. So that's what they did. Again, it's also with this idea of like the collective and the collection. What else am I doing? Yes. So I've also recently, working with Kevin, got invited for a research residency in Berlin. So it was probably at the end of next year when we'll go. Together we created a kind of, we're planning to create a repository of collective knowledge on self-built bioplastics and kombucha material research. So I have a kombucha vat over here. This is Khalid. Say hello to Khalid.
Hi, Khalid.
So yeah, I can show you some of our material research. So this is from his website. So during MCO, he was supposed to work with Kongsi KL people at Seni Tiga, but then he had nothing to do. So he he was creating all of these bioplastics. But yeah, we're invited for that, so we might go to that. Hopefully we can go to that. And also I run an anime blog, which collects my favorite scenes of unimaginable urban conditions, architectural anomalies, and anime that I really like. And it's still running today, and people follow it for some reason. And it's so yeah, a definition is not necessarily an order, but I am still understanding. I still find the idea of the collective to be so instinctual. And a lot of my projects were done collectively, and to think that architects is a singular kind of phenomenon or a singular key figure in life or something like that, like how Remco House is in the front page of all magazines now. For some reason, I don't know why. It's not necessarily true, and architecture should never be kind of think of it as singularly tied to one individual. And I think that this idea is shifting towards to kind of oikos and togetherness, perhaps it's more important. And right now I'm looking at it as in a state of stasis and a sort of kind of balance. But yeah, anyway, that's about it I have thus far. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Um. Wait. I think. Before I ask questions, I think. Ben, did you raise your hand? Is it? Ben, did you raise your hand? Oh, Ben is a mistake. Okay. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Clarissa, for the sharing. So I
You're
think
welcome.
I have I think you think you're like everywhere. I mean, apart from the research, and then you also do the kombucha and also doing the anime. I think it's really admiring. Um, Perhaps I just want to ask a bit more on the Hong Kong project, the one that UEDL done. So if you don't mind, I was just wondering, like, I mean, I understand that it's elective for the student works, and then also um uh I understand it's a student work, but I was just wondering that, like as we designers or like architect, we tend to be more, I don't know, ambitious for a bit. As in, I was just wondering that, because like the project that you guys done, engaging with the social workers, but at the end, the solution is more like a industrial piece, or like a furniture, like just helping them to sort of like declutter the object, if you don't mind I put it that way. Will that be like a better way to really help to solve the housing problem? Just wondering, in your
Mm,
opinion.
because these kind of marginal communities would move from space to space to space to space.
Mm.
An instant, rather maybe not instant, but a short-term solution that we have come up with after looking at this data for so long, and it's not a new problem, the phenomenon of subdivided housing, because
Yeah.
of the incredibly long waiting list.
Mm.
So with the capacity of the Urban Ecologies Design Lab and the fact that we're within a university, talking only about UEDL right now, we thought that to create and to also teach students to how to engage with the public before they were able to really, and also to make high quality products to be something to be more useful to them at that point. But obviously, if you look at like the other project with the kind of modular housing that we did with the aluminum one, with this in between kind of, because it was situated in this kind of in between housing, in between development. It was in a building that was slated for urban renewal, and we found this kind of lot, and we thought that to be more kind of helpful to the solution. Because obviously, as I've stated, public policy would not be a one solution kind of fits all thing. There are many more ties that is more important
Do you
to kind
mind
of think about.
elaborate? Yeah.
So for example, like these people that we were working with, most of them are just above the minimum wage. And I don't think it is kind of saying that we should increase the kind of wage gap for public housing, because even in this even in this current state, we don't have enough like kind of projects building for public housing. So the supply is incredibly low and we can't catch up with the kind of demand. So I think that shifting towards in-between kind of spaces, for example, the one that we did, might be an interesting solution. Another way is to use like industrial buildings. I know that there's been talks, if I'm not mistaken, to kind of use industrial buildings
Convert to
recently
housing.
to convert to maybe temporary housing or in-between housing solutions.
Okay. But but then there's no example be done in Hong Kong yet thus
Not
far.
yet. I think they just shifted the policy, if I'm not mistaken, like once I came here.
I see.
Yeah.
Do you mind to like just maybe elaborate a bit on like in your maybe own opinion? Because like you mentioned earlier, like housing has definitely been like a problem for Hong Kong like, a long time ago. But I mean, based on like the social and economic constraints. But in your opinion, like what it's really like a really beneficial, I mean, solution that can be like done. I don't know. It's a bit broad,
I'm
is
no
it?
expert, but like I think the industrial building thing would be quite interesting, because actually a lot of people live in these kind of huge industrial spaces illegally. anyway. And most of them are kind of like expats. Most of them are artist communities. Most of them are, yeah.
They say artists are most creative when they are poorer.
Usually, if anyone wants to look at them, you can look at Fotan industrial kind of artist spaces. There's like every year, I think they let their studio out, open studios, and you guys can go and see their spaces. And obviously, they live there.
I see.
Once you like go in.
I'm just wondering, like those families or with kids, right? When they grow up in an environment where like it's co-living or it's like subdividing or illegal or like you know, like how does their childhood be like? You know, how is their memories gonna be like? It's so different. You grow up sharing things with others, and also, I don't know.
So like a lot of, actually we spoke to a lot of them. So their
The social
houses,
workers.
yeah, the social workers will always tell us the stories because it's not something that's reducible to just statistics. And a lot of their spaces, maybe it's like 100 square feet, 200 square feet, 300 square feet is maybe a bit much already for a subdivided unit for a family of 4. And that's considered a normal house in Hong Kong. And the normal flat in Hong Kong is maybe 600 square feet for a 4-person family.
Wow.
1,000 is like very forgiving. Right now I'm in a 1,000 square feet apartment and I feel
all by yourself.
Not all by myself. I have 2 roommates, but I feel very like liberated. So most of them grow up, they have to do their homework under their bed. So most of them live in bunk beds. Maybe their storage is at the top and then they sleep below and then they have to like bend over. They always have a lot of back problems when they grow up. A lot of them also have bad eyesight because they have to work.
Not enough sunlight.
Not enough sunlight, but also because maybe their parents are sleeping and they still have to do homework. What do? You have to use your mobile phone or LED lighting, like very bad lighting. Most of them also cook, clean, and wash everything within a toilet. So there's also that as well. So
I see. Okay. Great. Before I ask for the more question, I think I have to pass the question to the floor. If anyone has any question, please do ask. Feel free to. I think we can start with Yvonne. Yvonne is an expert in London housing right now. Yvonne, you want to ask your question that you have posted?
Oh my god, is it noisy? Because my fan is quite noisy.
No, you can't hear anything except your voice.
Oh yeah.
Great.
So I have 2 questions. So first one is, what were the difficulties you faced when communicating with the communities? Is there a difficulty of getting their trust? And the second question is, so there was a documentary on Hong Kong workers where it is so unaffordable to live in Hong Kong. They actually moved to Shenzhen to live and then go back and forth to Hong Kong and live. So the low income families were considering to like move over to Shenzhen.
So for your first question, how was it, right? Was it difficult to gain their trust? Most of them are quite receptive because most of them, thankfully, we had a mediator, which was our social workers. And it is their social workers kind of like, they have the practice and they have the knowledge to teach us how to engage with these people. And it's really important that we have to have them next to us when we're doing all of this. Because if not, if we say something unintentional or harmful, we wouldn't know, right? So thankfully, it was the social worker who finds these people who are receptive or open to the possibility to us coming in and engaging with them. But of course, there's always slippages. And but most of the time, it has been really nice. And of course, there are some projects that they were taken and then they used it. Maybe they broke it and then we had to take it back. There are some projects they didn't want it in the end.
Oh, they just don't want it?
They just don't want it, and we have it in my office. Like I was sitting hitting it the whole day, every day.
Oh, what's the reason that they don't want it?
It wasn't what they expected.
Oh.
So again, it's this kind of balance of expectations. So we can't make a completely like new, completely designed product or object, which is maybe very beautiful to us as designers. It has to fit with their everyday needs. So it's balancing our kind of intention or our stake, but then also understanding their needs, and that was more important. And So to gain their trust, it was a gradual process. Most of the time they were talking on WhatsApp, calling, because they only had 1 day free a week, most of them. So, but yeah, that was the kind of process. And about the Shenzhen thing, I think some do, but these people are also, they also have kind of, I don't really know. I think some of them are informal workers, or they are maybe illegal. They come from China, maybe they come and work here, and then if they go back, then it might be harder to come back to Hong Kong, you know, for their work. Some of them have like, yeah, maybe they're undocumented. I'm not really sure because I wasn't allowed to ask these questions, but that's what the social workers were telling me about. But I'm sure like in like CUHK, a lot of the students also live in Shenzhen, like Chinese University of Hong Kong, which is up north, right? Kevin, tell me if I'm wrong. Some of the students would live in Shenzhen and go to school, for example. Yeah, in the Chinese University, which is a few stops away. But I'm sure a lot of students also like live in Shenzhen but go to Hong Kong for education, like primary to secondary. Bit like the Singapore Malaysian thing, I think.
Yeah, it is like Singapore to Johor every day, is it?
Yeah, that
the
thing.
same concept.
It's a little bit quite like that, but maybe, yeah.
And this just reminds me that I have you speak to the social workers, and I don't know if the occupants that, I mean, since it's so unfavorable to live there, and then will they don't want to come back, as in like they don't recognize like Hong Kong as a home, something like, because it might be more favorable to live in Shenzhen. Would that be such a case?
I'm sure there are, but Hong Kong has its own kind of, right now maybe it's a bit different. Before it has its own kind of spaces for maybe a more freer kind of expression of thought. I'm saying this with like a lot of hesitation right now, but their education system, for sure, a lot of them kind of come for the sake for their children. So our education system is definitely a lot better. And they see that, and they see a lot more opportunities, and they're okay with that.
I think Tong asked a question. Do you want to just ask?
Yeah, I can elaborate a bit more.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, what do the social workers think of architects? Because this seems slightly comical, because like if I was a social worker, I'd see like, okay, why did this architect make such a shitty building in the first place with such small house rooms? And then some more research architects come in like, okay, so now there's a shitty building, we're gonna fix the shitty room in the shitty building. And like they're just like, why did you build the shitty building in the first place? Like that's what I'm imagining they're thinking. But
yeah, but I think they have more knowledge and understanding of the kind of the shittiness of the housing system. It's because of the housing system and policies put in place that put us in that kind of shitty position in the first place. You know, it's a larger kind of ties or network, so to speak. So the developer kind of model, or the stake of the developer in Hong Kong, the social workers can't fix that, nor can architects fix that. It's not our place. We only take up to 10% of the whole fee when we complete a design project, right? So what can we say? We are just everyone knows that we're just trying to live and survive within this kind of larger kind of ties. And I think they are aware of that. But there is one kind of co-housing project that tried to, there was this building that was slated for redevelopment for the co-housing movement under the Hong Kong Trust, Community Trust, where they tried to separate the architects came in. There's this architects called Domat, I think. They came in to this building that was slated to demolish in maybe 5 years, and they separated the rooms to a little bit more better conditions, but still not the best. But they tried to do their best. So I will maybe send the link later to share with everyone, but it's difficult because of these kind of larger ties, and also the plot sizes, and also a lot of regulations that all of us can
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sympathize. Yeah.
So is there like also any sort of like campaign to have some policy put in place? Like I was thinking of like the city of Melbourne, for example, like because they had an influx of a lot of these like Asian developers that were just building apartment buildings for square footage just to sell out to foreign investors in a way. And like it came to a condition that all these buildings were basically fulfilled this square footage thing just for the financialization of the land, but they were just not livable. So they had some policy put in place dictating certain conditions to make these houses livable because, you know, locals were living there, and yet the buildings were built for people who will never visit the building. So like, is there any kind of push for policy to kind of have some sort of regulating body for housing, or is that just non-existent?
So SOCO has been doing that for its whole existence. The Society of Community Organization. You can see like their beautiful exhibitions that they do with the imagery to the photographs that they commissioned to also these kind of projects. They're tackling it from all fronts. So that would be the kind of advocacy. But in terms of like policy put in place, I think we'll see what happens. I don't know what will happen when because there's also this idea of us, Hong Kong being handed back to China in 2047. Right, we're sitting in this kind of 50 years of in-between space, and
Actually excited to talk about this project. No, just joking. This part. Do you want to elaborate more on SOCO?
Elaborate more on SOCO. They are a kind of community organization that has been here in Hong Kong for many years, and they do all kinds of projects ranging from the elderly to children to kind of homelessness, and they do it from all kind of facets, from exhibition to
So not
engaging,
just shelter, is it?
not just shelters, but they also do shelters. They also engage with people like us and are excited to take on new kind of projects, and it's really fascinating the work that they do, but they can only advocate so much about these issues at one time. Yeah, I feel.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions from the floor?
What other questions are there? Let me look through.
Yeah. Okay.
If there's no other questions from other people, it sounds like I just have a lot of questions. But like, just because we have one thing in common, it seems, is what are you doing with the kombucha?
Oh yeah, the kombucha.
Kevin
Yes.
can talk about it because I'm the one dealing with the kind of like the social engagement process, but then Kevin's the one who's actually, Kevin's my partner. He's the one who's actually doing all the biofabrication sciencey stuff that I have no idea about.
Kevin, do you want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
I will take the kombucha stuff here.
No. So you know, I was in KL. I'm back in Hong Kong now, but I was KL. I didn't have a job. Had to figure out something to do. And you know, I was trying to kind of save some money, thinking about how I can do projects at home, and so that kind of led to me starting this like tiny lab space in our apartment. So I was taking like recycled materials from the neighborhood and Rex Kale. There's like the Stellar coffee shop. I was taking their like coffee grains. There's like the sugarcane shops on the street on Jalan Sultan, taking their fibers and just like yeah, kind of combining that with some bioplastics. So I was using like seaweed based like algae.
Wow, it's so cool.
And then this is the kombucha, the bacteria that you grow. Once it's dried, it looks like that on Clarissa's screen, and it's super strong. It's
So
like
you use the SCOBY.
yeah,
The base
that's
is plastic.
that
Sorry,
is
go ahead.
and
Because
so
like, yeah.
over 90% cellulose, like over 95%. So you can pull it as hard as you want, and it won't break. It's
I'm
pretty
trying right now,
as a material.
but I'm also a very small person, so.
But the one that I did, we weren't getting the SCOBY and drying it out. We were skimming off. There's a film on the top, and then we were taking that out and like layering it on some sort of substratum to like cast it into different shapes, and it wasn't very strong. So like,
this is so strong.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty
much. I hate that project so much. Like, Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty smelly, but you can actually treat it, kind of like kill off the bacteria, and then you can even bleach it like you do with paper. Yeah.
But why bleach it? It's boring.
Uh,
Yeah. I wouldn't put them. You could.
Sorry, it was that strong. The strength is because it's plastic, is it?
No, this is it's bacteria that's
Mhm.
being grown. Bacteria and yeast actually,
Oh,
and when they're growing, they form
the
a
structure.
cellulose network. In plants, you have cellulose as well, but actually not as much as in a bacterial system. In plants, you have like lignin, which is like a glue that binds together the cellulose fibers.
Mhm.
And so like in paper making process, actually you have to cook the plant to remove the glue, and then you're left with the pure cellulose. In this case, you don't have to do any cooking. It's already mostly cellulose and super strong. And so yeah, one thing that I'm trying to work on is like try to do joinery with this. It has a bit like a faux leather kind of feel to it. And then so our project in Berlin, there's like so we're thinking about doing experimentation and production, but as also asking the question of how can we do that collaboratively and maybe build like a kind of cooperative model of production around it. So that's
because the space is also the space is at the center of what? Urbanism and architecture, something like that. It's like a German. I don't remember what it's called. ZKU.
art and
Urbanistic. Yeah, Kunst und, yeah, art and urbanism. And
I think Wen asked something. Wen, do you want to open your mic and ask it?
Wait, hold on. Hi. I'm just really curious about the whole SCOBY because I make kombucha myself, and then actually SCOBY is actually quite porous because when you tear it, it kind of just tear out. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you strengthen it? Like, what do you add to it? Or is it just like purely SCOBY, which means you add like your black tea and sugar and water, and then you wait for 2 weeks, then you form that SCOBY, right? Do you add anything to strengthen it?
It's purely just SCOBY. We leave it for a week or to 10 days, and it gets to like a bit more than a centimeter thick, and then you leave it to dry, and yeah, so like in tension, it's super strong. But the thing that that we did modify is that SCOBY it really loves to absorb water, right? And so what I tried was to coat it in this thing called sodium alginate, which is like an extract from brown seaweed, and it's what like industries use to make like keep cups. You know, if you use like reusable cups, so it's like kind of alginate based, and then they mix it with some like plastic resin. So you coat the SCOBY with that, and it becomes waterproof. And then you have like a lot of applications from that. And then using the alginate, you can also coat it with stuff. Maybe you saw in her gift, there was like a lot of different materials. You can coat the SCOBY with like coffee grains, eggshell, fibers, whatever. You know, you can embed the fibers in them too. Quite cool.
All right.
Oh, do you have a...
So this is the one that was embedded with the
passion fruit flavored kombucha is really good.
the one with like coffee grains, and then we use it as a lamp. And then it has, let me find a light to shine behind. And also at the bottom is what? The dried grass. Just hard, like dead plants.
Wow.
Claire, you can take the folder and there's like...
Oh yeah, your folder, sorry, yeah.
Stuff in.
Have you guys thought of the application yet?
Well, we're doing material tests. I was actually gonna collaborate with Stellar, the coffee shop at
Make
Rex,
their coasters.
but then I ended up getting stuck in Hong Kong, so can't do that now.
I see.
Like make some coasters. I was thinking to make kind of like bottles or bags or like wallets.
Alginate
Like simple.
Would it be cool if we can make it into garment or like a fashion though? to be honest. Yeah.
This
There's
is
a
like
lot
a
of people out there
coaster
doing that experimentation.
experiment. This is like coffee grounds, I think, and tea grounds. Not really with the
It's hard to
SCOBY.
see. It's backlit.
Yeah.
It's
Everything
okay.
looks the same.
It
It's
is
okay.
what it
We
is.
will have another session with you sharing the fabrication, Kevin.
Oh, okay.
It's like incredibly sticky. Kevin, what did you make me? Alright, take it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sorry. I think Edmund has a question earlier. Is it regarding Clarissa sharing? I need to go.
What did you ask me?
So
It just
it's
tell
just
Edmund
following
to
to
say
Tong's
it.
question,
Okay.
and then just following to Tong's question and say that, you know, after your intervention, did you actually follow up to ask the occupants?
Yes.
Like after like a month, yeah.
Yes, we always have to keep in touch with them. There's like a survey, like most kind of social research, sociology, ethnographic kind of research methodology. So we have to keep talking to them, check up on them, make sure that our line is open. For example, there was one particular project that the bamboo laminate started molding, and then I had to go in and paint it all with the best paint, best white durable paint possible, in order to kind of, because each home is also has its own kind of climate, right? You don't know how are they using aircon, are they not using aircon, are they fan or not using fan. Hong Kong is more humid than Malaysia.
That's
And
quite
I find Malaysia climate very comfortable compared to Hong Kong summer. So yeah, so we have to do that.
Is that question answered, Edmund?
Yeah, much so. I think Joanne have a question though.
Yeah,
Bro.
I also think Haziq has one interesting question. I think Haziq was asking what was your biggest culture shock after coming back to Malaysia? Haziq, open your mic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
Hello, fellow migrant.
hello. Reverse culture shock. I think like just coming back home after being away, I think there's a lot that kind of hits you in the face. I'm just curious, because of all the interesting work you've done with housing in Hong Kong, how do you kind of see, you know, do you kind of, and you're living in like central KL, which a lot of people, if they grew up in Malaysia, never would do, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So just wondering what your experience was like.
Well, I find the pavements incredibly difficult to walk on.
The pavement?
Yes, because I don't have a car. I don't want to have a car. I don't think I ever do. And I know everyone is like, what? You don't want a car? It's okay. I think I'm from Penang. I'm not from KL. So
you're from Penang?
Yeah, I'm from the mainland side in like kind of like middle of nowhere, kampong kind of Penang. Well, no, Penang can't really be kampong, but anyway, yes. So I'm from like the mainland, so it's not even Georgetown, nor is it like kind of the island, right? So coming to KL, I'm just like, oh right, okay, so it's like an unwalkable and not really working city, but it's okay. It has a lot of space and a lot of space for engagement and kind of experimentation, especially looking at these art collectives, how they came up and why they came up, and the passion for the work that they do. Like a lot of the ones that I looked at, even like Little Giraffe, like Story House, I always cite them, or I also cite, I can't remember their names now, but there's also one in Johor called Sekolah Baroka, and also there was, who was I talking to the other day? The Tuyang Initiative in East Malaysia, like having awareness of all of this that's happening is like really amazing. It's not something that you'd see in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has very little space other than kind of the institutionalized M+, or what's the other one called, Tycoon, or like their art basel, like bullshit. Like that's like another kind of world in itself, in the art world, where it doesn't allow for people to engage with, even though there are kind of bottom-up communities, but they're slowly dying away. Malaysia has that kind of possibility, and I can see that, and it's really forgiving. And I really like this bit. Like I have a big room. I know it's small to a lot of people, but it's big for me.
Nice. Is your question answered, has it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was just a discussion because I think it's always nice to have like a set of fresh eyes, I guess, but like you're rooted there, right? Like you are from Malaysia, you're Malaysian, but then you have this set of new eyes, and there's always a sense of optimism that comes when you come back, which is really nice.
Really?
Like, I think
my parents were asking me like, why would you ever go back?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But then you're there and you see like potential.
Different.
Right?
Yeah. Though I was very aware that I know like it's okay. I know I cannot walk very comfortably here. Like I know that already. I know the food is amazing.
And you can't rely much on the bus as well. I'm so sorry.
The bus is kind of scary. Don't take the bus. And be careful, don't walk around at night as a girl. Like things like really bad stuff like that I have to kind of embody and know.
Oh,
So,
okay, let's not go there. All right. Okay. Thank you, Clarissa, again for your sharing.
One more question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, Joanne. Yes, go ahead and ask.
Okay. Go back to the project, right?
Yeah. Last question. Yes.
Yeah. The infill to the house that you build, the structures to organize all the stuff, right? This is just discussion. Okay. So do you think actually building more structures will help them? Or Marie Kondoed it?
Marie Kondoed.
She makes sense.
I don't know. It's like because okay, from a design perspective, right? We always build structures to put in some other places.
Right.
We don't need to build. We can just do other stuff. I don't know. I mean, this is a question. But what's your other?
No, I understand what you're saying, but a lot of the stuff that they have already thus far are breaking. Like the furniture is breaking. They never had the opportunity to have like kind of high quality furniture for them where the joints actually work and it's not like porous and microfiber. I don't know what they're called, but like just like IKEA stuff. Like what are they called again? MDF? Yeah.
MDF.
Wow. Sorry, I've left architecture for a while. Like porous MDF kind of with a very thin veneer, kind of finishing things that break apart in moist, fungus-ridden homes.
Okay.
You know, like the fact that because after the bamboo kind of veneer laminate that we chose, not the veneer, bamboo laminate that we chose, we shifted to aluminium prefabricated components, which were kind of 1 inch by 1 inch, and we were dealing with the facade. I could talk about that another time once my professor publishes more, but that was more engaging because it dealt with like the skin of the building, and in itself it's not necessarily an infill, but rather it's mediating between like the incredibly hot sun that we get here and in Hong Kong, and also like mosquito netting and also providing space for hanging clothes, things like that. I wouldn't see it as an intervention.
Okay.
In the kind of tectonic sense, but rather it engages with their kind of everyday needs, and that's why it takes a long time to develop one piece of furniture.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Clarissa. Hi, we're just on time, so it's 9:15 right now. We're just gonna take 5 minutes of water break or toilet break, and then we'll come back to our second speaker's Tom.
Yay!
All right, guys. Thanks, Clarissa, again.
Thank you.
I like the vibe. I really like the kombucha thing. When are you selling it as a merchandise?
Hopefully soon, whenever I can get back.
But is it possible to do it like large scale size?
Yeah, we really want to.
Like you need space as well. I mean, the yeast needs to ferment as well.
Yeah. So we have an idea for a project later on. But in theory, you could do it as big as you want. You just need to set up a pool, and then have enough of the sugar and the
sugar,
yeast,
spice, everything nice.
and everything. Yeah. And in theory, you can grow the SCOBY as big as you want.
Is it leathery?
As long as, pardon?
Is it leathery?
Yeah, it's very like sticky and leathery.
Sorry, because for someone that, for example, me, like I don't know like how the kombucha process works. So what you do, you actually have like a big container and then just pour everything inside. Sorry, can you do
Yeah,
mine?
so basically you're
Green colored.
yeah, you're privileging a certain species, a group of species of bacteria and yeast, so that like they basically grow and colonize the entire liquid, and then and the interface between the air and the liquid, that's where the SCOBY forms.
I see.
We call it the SCOBY, but another way to say it is called the pellicle.
Wow.
And
you
so
did like a really intensive research on it, or do you have like a PhD background on this kombucha?
So I had the I like to say that like the generosity of the internet enabled me to like do this research, and there's like I had to download a lot of papers, scientific papers, that usually are limited to journals.
Wow, Clarissa is showing
to be
us.
honest, like more than like 90% of them are pretty useless. But then there would be a few that actually talks about why their experiment is useful to the world. Yeah, so I did read a lot of papers because it's one of the problems with this kind of bio whatever movement in architecture and design right now is that a lot of it is, for me, like purely aesthetic and formalistic. So it's kind of like you just like splash some algae here and then do some like curvy organic looking structure, and then you call that bio something. And I think that it's important to like really understand.
That's what Ecologic Studio does, man. It's so fake, I swear.
Right. To be honest, I thought that about
they just like to grasshopper shit, and they go like, this grasshopper is informed by data and shit. It's like, it's not.
Yeah. So that's why I read a lot of papers, because like, I needed to understand what the kind of the polymer sciences are, the kind of, the chemistry of the whole thing. I mean, I'm still not an expert, but like, I feel like, if you're gonna do this kind of
nice stitch though. I think you can, Hazik. I will try. We tried to do this one where we grow one with another piece attached to it. Where was it? Yeah, it works.
There's not much left in that. You need to fill it up.
And how long you have to wait for the formation though?
It's like 7 days for like
right now, Khaled is very fat.
Oh, so you thins down like after 7 days, is it?
No, it will just keep growing.
Well, it's actually like it's in layers, so it's like
when was it?
So you could actually peel it off and like peel it into separate layers.
We have so many babies. Anyone wants kombucha or wants to make kombucha, ask me. I have a lot of. I have a SCOBY hotel.
I saw one unmute, so I think we're interested.
I just want to share a bit because like SCOBY is really like you will just keep growing like forever. Okay. You just need to keep feeding it with sugar.
Wow.
And then it like after 7 days it will be one layer and another layers. In 10 weeks you probably have 10 layers. So it's unlimited and it's free in a way. I mean, except for you pay for your sugar and your tea.
It's very cheap.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting, which is what and also just for insight, when I was looking into what do I do with my extra SCOBY, you can actually use it as a face mask.
Oh, wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, you can use it as a face mask. You can actually replace, if you are a vegan, you can use it to make it a sushi. You can actually eat your SCOBY.
So it's edible as well.
Yeah. You can just eat it. I mean, it depends on whether you like it or not. It's just that taste. I don't know. I mean, everyone is quite personal. And then you can actually make it as a cookie. You can blend it in your smoothie because there's all the probiotic, which is good for your guts. So there's a lot of things you can use with SCOBY. It's like that's why I'm very interested to make it as a material. And I'm actually like in the process of trying to like do some research to make it like a surface or whatever, or like a mouse pad, like you say, like
mouse pad would be nice.
Or something like that. So it's an alternative to leather, actually.
Yeah.
That's why I was curious about how you strengthen it, because like you say, you dry it. I think after you dry it, it's probably more like strengthened. But when it's quite moist, it's actually quite easily to just tear it off.
Like malleable, it's stretchable.
So that one you need a bit more of the science side to like.
Yeah. Well, the drying you have to be patient as well. Like drying it too quickly can make it crispy.
Yeah.
And drying it slowly, like there is a kind of technique to it too. But I would suggest like looking at composites. Like most materials, I think like architecture design, like usually when you make composites, then you can start to pick and choose the properties that you want. Like making it waterproof is pretty important, I find. Like
we don't have a website yet, but do you want to share your website, Kevin?
Oh, you guys have a website for it already?
No, he has a website which has a bunch of his like tests.
Yeah, share.
好啦，你share啦。
Okay, thank you. We shall continue the kombucha talk later if you guys interested. Now, I think we are ready for our second speaker, Tong. Yes, welcome. Hi.
Okay, how do I share my screen?
Yes.
To share. Okay.
Guys, don't be shy. I don't have any questions. Just ask later, okay? Tong is very open to questions.
Yeah. Okay. So this I've never presented half an hour before, so this is gonna be new, and I only practiced twice. So forgive me for any kind of confusion that I may experience. So interestingly enough, like Clarissa, I'm probably more into research and don't really see myself as an architect, even though I spent I don't know how many years studying it. So I recently graduated from the Architectural Association in London in 2019, and kind of right now I'm just doing freelance bits and bobs here and there. So it's kind of important to say that I'm not really an architect, because I'm gotten into something that is called open source investigation or research, which is basically research that operates within open source intelligence. So open source intelligence is whatever is available publicly on the internet or accessible to the public. So this is to counteract kind of investigations done by police or state bodies, and is typically done for human rights investigations to hold state bodies accountable. So I'm going to just show a few examples, and I've just selected examples done by actual personal friends of mine. So the first example here is an investigation by Amnesty International on air wars. And just to show what kind of material and how it's used in a way. So this is an investigation on the war on Raqqa in Syria, where it was kind of bombed, kind of subjected to airstrikes by US military. And Amnesty International and Air Wars did a strike monitor, where they basically crowdsourced volunteers over the internet to examine satellite imagery to see damage on buildings. And they came up with this map of kind of verifying claims of bombings in Raqqa. So this was really important because the US military claimed that they were operating within international law and conducting war under humane circumstances, and saying that they were targeting, their strikes were heavily targeted, but actually it seemed that that was not the case. They actually performed a lot of airstrikes on the city and subjected civilians to a lot of harm and a higher civilian casualty than the US military claimed. So this has kind of brought together this kind of open source investigation using satellite imagery that's available on Google Earth. It kind of forms now a body of evidence to hold the US military accountable. Another kind of organization that does something that does it more closely in an architectural kind of setting is forensic architecture. I'm showing the case of the killing of Harif Augustus, who was a man who was killed in Chicago in 2018. They kind of not only corroborate witness testimony, but then primarily worked through police body camera footage that was released by the police that was supposedly exonerating from the police from any wrongdoing. However, what forensic architecture did, it was use the police's publicly released video body camera footage against him to kind of question the narrative and the circumstances in which Horrific Justice was killed. So I'm just going to show a small clip of how of their methodology to show, just so you get an idea of how the process works. Can you hear the audio, by the way? Did you hear audio just now? No, shit, okay.
I think I have to hover up and then at the view option there, choose like a share computer screen, computer sound, sorry. But using
Where?
Mac? Are you using Mac?
Oh yeah, I got it, share computer sound. Okay,
Great,
so
awesome.
I'll split it back.
I'm
Okay.
gonna try.
To find out whether the incident
You heard that, right?
Yeah.
occurred as described by the police. We set out to investigate the movements of each character. To do so, we placed each camera within a 3D model, accounting for the lens distortions at the extremities of each frame. We tracked the movement of each of the police body-worn cameras. Using 3D figures, we then modeled each person's positions. In this case, police officer Megan Fleming. Spatial markers, such as paving stones, allowed us to more accurately determine the figure's position. We modeled their positions and movements from multiple camera perspectives. The same process was used to model the movements of each other character in the scene. The dynamic model thus allows us to interrogate the incident from different perspectives and speeds, revealing nuances of the event's choreography.
So that's just a little taster of how kind of the broad nature of open source investigations and how may possibly even give you ideas of how architecture and architectural technology can be used in these settings. I'm also on my own as an independent researcher. I've also done some research with kind of spatial reconstruction again on publicly available material, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about my 5th year project that I did at the AA. So the reason why I brought up forensic architecture is because that's how I got up. I got in contact with this kind of field. I was a student of Christina Varvia, who's the Deputy Director of Forensic Architecture, and I spent a year-long course at my final year of the AA with him. So, so one thing that I wanted to do is not necessarily study something from a distance, like a lot of open source investigators or researchers do at all, actually. I wanted to do something very personal to me. I'm not, so even though I'm Malaysian, I have a Malaysian citizenship, I have a Malaysian passport, I never lived in Malaysia. My family migrated out away from Malaysia when I was 2 months old, so I had very little contact with Malaysia. So I wanted to do a project for my family, basically, that centers the experiences of my family. And I wanted to, and this was done mostly because the only things I knew of Malaysia were through the stories I heard from my family. And also I just wanted to hold my research accountable to not only myself, but also to them, so that to make sure that I was accurate and representing them appropriately. Because I find that if you're not, if you do something from a distance, you might say something, anything, you know, and might be inaccurate. And so this is a picture of my pawpaw. In the middle is my pawpaw, my grandmother. And she's eating KFC with her siblings. So it's her younger brother and sister with her. And this picture is important because the project I did at the AA starts with their father, which is my great-grandfather. And so he was a bit of a badass. He had a lot of pet snakes, and etc. And like, however, I never knew him because he passed away before I was born. The only way that I knew him was through this bottle. And this is a bottle of herbal medicine, if you see on my camera, that he made and sold shortly after World War II. And that's the only way I knew of him. And the reason why he had snakes was because it was part of that process of testing this medication, which is a little bit quack. Oops, sorry. So it's very multimedia, by the way. So I started my project doing this animation, which was interrogating what could be read from the surface of the bottle. I wanted to pick apart as to like all the different layers of the narratives on the bottle. So starting with the ingredients and kind of the recipe for the medication on the inside, the topical ointment, basically it was interesting because the medicine recipe came from multiple medical traditions from India, Malay, and Chinese traditions, but then also looking at the design of the bottle and how it arose from conflict of copyright and laws that were imposed during the British colonization. And then of course the languages, you know, not there's all different languages in different but information in different languages. There's no translation at all. You have to understand 3 languages to understand any information on this whole information of this bottle, which is, funnily enough, I only speak English, so this is even more of a diasporic story, you know, like I have no way of accessing my history. So the next step was then to take these mysterious stories I'd hear about my great-grandfather and start to reconstruct them spatially to understand, you know, just to locate them and see kind of this space, peel back this space to see where he was kind of situating. And also all these narratives around the bottle and how it was circulated throughout the Malayan emergency, essentially. So, you know, shortly after World War II was the Malayan emergency, which was a communist insurgency that happened in Malaysia that put the kind of Malaysia inside the Cold War, essentially. And the thing about my great-grandfather is the stories I've heard of him kind of, they were really cool about him being a playboy and like having snakes and stuff and medicine, but they kind of end with him mysteriously disappearing and being arrested during the emergency. You know, he did have some sort of illicit kind of background, and we don't really know what happened, but we suspect that he was involved in the communist insurgency. So I also started to look at where my family was during the Malayan emergency. And it's shortly after my great-grandfather's story ends, for me at least, it turns out that my family was relocated into a new village or Kampung Baru, or Singchun, however you want to call it. And I never knew what that was until I kind of started doing my own research at the age of 25.
Not long ago, this thriving new village on Malaya's main highway was a trouble spot plagued by communist terrorists. Now, after resettlement, it is a center of new industries and prosperous agriculture and happy family life. Not long ago,
I started doing my research from coming from London and never living in Malaysia at all. And because I had access to the National Archives in London, which was the second half of kind of Malaysia's story, because Malaysia lived under British colonial rule at the time. So what was interesting about how new villages were situated within the colonial narrative of Malaysia was that it was seemed to be painted as part of a military campaign. You know, during the Malayan emergency, a lot of these communist guerrillas were in the jungles, and like the only way that the British could kind of fight them, because they were not very well equipped at jungle warfare, was to, similar to like the case in Raqqa, just do airstrikes. However, it was difficult to determine where these guerrillas were hiding because there's very little visibility. So looking at all these kind of military documents and military presentations of the new village was not only just an urban typology, but it was a military urban typology. And there was a very particular narrative being spun around these new villages in the archives in the UK.
Squatters or country people living in isolated jungle areas. Into resettlement villages, where they can be given security and the usual social amenities within the administration. By the end of last year, over 300,000 squatters had been resettled in over 300 new villages.
So it seemed that my family did not just simply live in a new village. The village was not just simply a village, but it was something where they were forcibly removed. I later found out that the new village was actually technically a concentration camp. And that might sound extreme because a concentration camp, you'd think of the Nazi concentration camps in Germany. However, a concentration camp by definition is a camp that is where people are forcibly removed and concentrated in a specific location and against their will. So by definition, the new village was a concentration camp because people were relocated by the military. However, this was painted in a sympathetic light and within narratives of modernization. However, oh, what's the next thing? Oh gosh, I think I deleted it by accident. Okay, I deleted a slide by accident, so I'm just gonna show the video clip. So I started to interrogate these. Did I? Maybe it's okay. No, I'm thinking this is the old version of the presentation. Maybe not. We'll find out. So I started to examine these spaces architecturally and using kind of the skills I've learned to kind of reconstruct them in 3D. Also, we're kind of questioning this material that was painted from a very distant military perspective with kind of witness testimony. So here's, yeah.
Generation one, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
But usually the wire mesh with the barbed wire on the top.
旁边还放有生电了，怕那个什么分子来，那时候很严格检查的。
No, never mind. It's okay. So the ones speaking there were my father and a guy from a documentary. I later found out that, you know, the new village is not just an urban typology, it's part of something that's called a counterinsurgency or coin operations. So counterinsurgency is very different from normal kind of military warfare in the sense that the warfare is done from a political perspective and not from a physical force kind of perspective. So the aim of coin operations are to kind of manipulate the people into favoring whatever regime, and in this case, the British Empire. So the new villages operated as part of a military campaign to coerce the population, which was largely Chinese, as the Chinese population were closest to being coerced into communist ideology, into kind of loyalty to the British Empire. As the communist insurgency was a campaign to basically make Malaysia independent from the British Empire. See, this is why I got confused. That was supposed to come after that. Okay, so not only did I look at kind of details of these photographs to reconstruct them architecturally, I also started to look at basically the military campaign as an architectural project. So I've gotten a lot of, in my camera, you can see here, I have a lot of military manuals. So this one is the manual from the time in 1958. So it was a manual that was drafted towards the end of the Malayan emergency. And this is a manual that was, that's the most recent one from 2009. So it's a contemporary British Army manual for counterinsurgency operations. I had one more manual, which I borrowed from the library, that was like basically drafted for the Vietnam War. So the important thing about the Malayan emergency was that it's seen as a best practices case study for coin operations. And these techniques from the Malayan emergency was also used in Vietnam and subsequent wars. So that's why it's important to look at 2009. So I looked at Malaysia as kind of tried to deconstruct Malaysia as a theater of operations. Looking at basically the land use, the terrain, where these communist terrorists were presumably hiding, where British military troops were deployed, where the military bases like airfields were situated, where the transport links were, and then where the new villages were subsequently placed strategically within all of this framework to kind of strategically tackle the communist insurgency. And then also white zones, if you've heard of white zones in the Malayan emergencies context. White zones were basically groupings of new villages that was kind of done for either collective punishment or reward to kind of coerce the population into obeying the British regime. So kind of collated all of this information to kind of deconstruct how this military typology of architecture was created, essentially, to have this video, which so this video is spoken purely as quotes from all these military manuals, showing exactly how they function on an urban level. So the white, the red is obviously representing the communist, where communist threat was seen, and the blue is the kind of areas of coercion to the British Empire.
Firstly, the squatter areas serve as an ideal cover for the bandits, and it is probable that a number of bandits are in fact squatters. Secondly, the squatters are necessarily susceptible to pressure from bandits for the provision of food and shelter.
Such patrols set out to strike at the communist guerrillas whose campaign of violence has terrorized all Malaya. Somewhere in the jungle, a party of bandits is believed to be hiding.
Approximately 90% of the communist terrorists are Chinese. They are mostly young, thoroughly familiar with life in the jungle. In the current emergency, the armed forces have been called in to support the civil power in its task of seeking out and destroying armed communist terrorism.
Shape, secure, develop. The conceptual framework builds on proven counterinsurgency theories. Secure. The focus of any counterinsurgency operation is to secure the majority of the population so that it can turn against violence and in favour of the government's desired political settlement.
The Briggs Plan, which came into effect on 1st of June 1950, aimed at bringing proper administrative control to a population that had never been controlled before.
Defended hamlets also need to be tactically sited, both for defence and as basis for offensive operations. Hamlets can also be sited to serve a secondary purpose, such as the protection of main road junctions, railway stations, or even bridges.
This involved the rapid resettlement of squatters under the surveillance of police and auxiliary police. Chief Minister in any state may declare the fence surrounding any specified area to be perimeter fence. It is an offence to cross or take articles through a perimeter fence other than by a recognised gate.
Tanjong Ma, the town which General Templar punished because the number of incidents which had taken place around it has now reformed. It has turned itself into a fortress, and there are lookout towers dotted around it.
Shape. Shaping is the ability to influence and inform the perceptions, allegiances, attitudes, actions, and behaviours of all principal participants in the area of operation.
The rural youth of Asia was no longer prepared to accept the humdrum existence of village rural life. The desire to escape from this rut was closely allied with a desire for further education so that he could take his place in a modern and progressive community. Stated in one phrase, communism appeared to offer the cheapest and quickest passport to modernity. It is possible to establish in people's minds an equation something like this: legality plus construction plus results equal the government. Illegality plus destruction plus promises equal the insurgents. This is likely to make much more sense to a peasant than repeated statements that democracy is better than communism.
Develop. Development operations generally involve long-term activities and build on the opportunity that security offers. Local populations must derive some tangible benefit in terms of improving their lives in order to justify the costs associated with security operations.
So just a fun fact, the second last voice about the humdrum existence of rural life is David Green from Archigram. So yeah, for architecture people. So one thing that was that I noticed during my adventures in the archives was that it seemed that this narrative, this military narrative of the new village was highly curated. You know, the way that it was being portrayed was that this was a civilizing project and modernity was being offered to these kind of villagers essentially. So certain records within the National Archives were labeled with public records selected for permanent preservation, whatever was supporting the British Empire in a favorable light. However, there was list upon list upon list of documents to be destroyed upon the moment that the British Empire left Malaysia.
this was not an uncommon phenomenon for colonies at the time. Whenever the British Empire left their colony, there would always be a mass burning of documents, obviously concealing unfavorable aspects of their colonization. This is particularly important because this counterinsurgency campaign didn't only just happen in Malaysia, but it also has been often compared, at the time at least, by military personnel to a similar operation in Kenya, counterinsurgency campaign in Kenya, which wasn't necessarily against a communist insurgency, but an uprising of the Mau Mau people. The important part of this narrative is that the Kenyan Mau Mau trials, they're victims of the Kenyan Mau Mau detention, had kind of brought a legal case against the British government, because it's quite different, honestly. It's very different from Malaysia because the camps in Kenya was involved in forced labor and torture, and the kind of legal process for the Kenyan kind of victims, let's say, had gotten to some sort of financial settlement and a public apology from the British government. So looking back at our own narratives and how, we managed other people that have been subjected to similar forms of political manipulation, or I'm also kind of questioning how we also come to know the New Village as well, like how much of this narrative is kind of constructed around this in a certain kind of privileging certain perspectives. By the way, I don't have a conclusion. I'm not making any accusations. I'm 26 years old. I just graduated from university. Don't kill me. But oops, sorry. So I just was very curious about the fact that I didn't know that any of this happened, and I just assumed that because I'm a diasporic baby, like that's just a thing. Like I just don't know the shit. So then I just started asking a lot of my friends, like, did you know that any of this happened? And this is what the results were.
No, actually, I didn't know about them.
I have not.
No, I have not heard anything about it before.
So what I noticed is that most of my friends don't know, but maybe I just have a circle of friends that just don't know. I even asked them that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And those who did know, I realized whenever they did know, it's because their family was personally affected.
Yeah, I'm aware of New Villages.
Yeah. My father last time stayed in the Kombucha New Village.
So that last note from my dad is important because the reason why I was interested in this was not just because of general curiosity. It's also because my gonggong had a very particular also position within this narrative. He didn't just view. Yeah, he did agree that this was a modernization project. It did bring education to him and kind of social amenities. However, he had a very different experience because his two younger brothers were communist guerrillas. And this meant that it was a moment where his family was separated and they had to kind of love each other illicitly, essentially. So I started to, not like I did for my great-grandfather, I started to kind of look at the setting in which my grandparents and my father was born in, because when my dad was young, they still had a fence. So this is on TGIS, so it's blurry. But so I started to look into Jurang village, where in Perak, where my family is from, and started to kind of start to piece together what it was like at the time. So one thing I found very interesting was that I managed to find out that there has been some footage filmed in Jurang during the emergency.
This is a school in Jurang village. Winning the confidence of the people is one part of General Templar's plan to bring peace to Malaya.
And the interesting thing here is that, yes, it's within this narrative of civilizing, but there's a fence there. And all this civilizing and like modernizing was happening under a condition of detention, essentially. So
I started to compile everything, all the information, like a similar kind of open source investigative framework, to kind of interrogate the space. So, oh my God, where is it? There, yeah. So using contemporary satellite imagery, historical maps, street names, testimony, going on Street View, labeling every single house, and to kind of come up with an accumulation of information. And then using kind of historical evidence and kind of deep analysis, I've tried my best to draw up the plan of what Jeram village looked like during the emergency. And this is the final result, which is not annotated very well because this was part of the large report, technical report I did for my studies. So we'll see that later. But not only did I was interested in urban plan, I'm also interested in the architecture. So one thing I found really interesting was that I found this house in Jeram village that was eventually demolished on Street View. And this was one of the original buildings during the emergency because you could see atap leaves on the facade. And, you know, through kind of doing this spatial reconstruction thing again, managed to corroborate this with the typology at the time. And also the gate from the original gate is still there. I mean, not the original one, but the location is still there. And also the post office, the positions in the strategic sense from the military standpoint, still remains under a barbed wire fence and next to the police station. So the importance of like kind of documenting this is that it's not only just to interrogate this narrative, the colonial narratives that presented, but also to start archive our own histories and to kind of have this narrative, to tell the story on our terms. So so that building is not only just to corroborate, but also to just keep it as an artifact. I also, when I was there in Chinese New Year, I also went and took a lot of pictures of my dad's neighbor's house because it was an original house. And why did I take so many pictures, and they're really shitty pictures on a selfie stick? Well, it's because eventually I did some photogrammetry with it. So that's the house. I mean, it's a bit shitty and there's some glitches in the back because it doesn't like shiny things, but you know, I can clean it up. I just haven't been bothered to. You know, and every one of these little blue things is a photo that was taken on site, and I'm just, you know, collecting little houses. So, you know, so we're starting to archive the new village on our terms. Oh, back. So I didn't only just collect artifacts, I also started collecting testimony. I started mapping the testimony, not only my family, but my friends, ones I collected from my friends as well.
When the highway there, the main road outside, they fence it up.
You basically combine the two settlements in Mamang Kawan. My auntie was very simple that we are separated.
After the police always hunt for him. Sometime midnight I found him come back, and before morning he'll run away again. I don't know where he is until one day he suddenly disappeared forever.
Even in 1980, there's still culture imposed in the jungle area where settled the hillside and affecting all the road.
So now we're starting to get more nuances about the reality of these spaces, and actually, you know, some of the way that these witnesses are describing is that some of the structures of detention still remain on site, at least slightly longer than the British had reported. And also, I mean, obviously it was not on their terms anymore, but basically we're already starting to reveal more nuances. However, I can say witness testimony is not always reliable, so I'm not making conclusions based on this at all. But this is just about the methodology and talking about the importance of telling our histories on our terms, especially when the histories definitely were motivated by a political nature. So I started to compile these histories to create my own archive. I call it Archive of Hearts and Minds. And this is and following the tradition of my great grandfather, I tried to make like a bottle of a message in a bottle to distribute to people. So here's the bottle in the camera here. This is not the final one because I lost it. This is a draft copy, but here the label here is kind of designed with kind of aspects of the narrative that was portrayed by conventional archives of the British archives. And I eventually, screen printed it with like, I really like screen printing. So I screen printed it. It was really fun. I made those little bottles, has like cute little registration marks in the corner. And like I gave them as gifts to friends. So each one of these bottles has a different testimony, and each serial number corresponds to a different family. So it's a testimony from each family and from multiple generations. And this kind of has come full circle because this is a picture of my grandparents, and they came to London for my graduation, and this is them looking at my work at the final exhibition at the Architectural Association in London. And my grandmother here is smiling because she's so happy to see that people now know who her father is, and it's all the way in London. And I think it's really beautiful to see the story being of our terms that was mostly told from a British perspective come to Britain and express ourselves in public for the public to see. And I've had a lot of really interesting conversations with people based on this. So the project basically was a documentation of this collective amnesia, documenting how who knew across different generations, and also this history of counterinsurgency techniques and the afterlife of a counterinsurgency campaign 50 years after it has ended, essentially. And we're still living with the effects of that kind of military control, not only in our spaces, but also socially within our families, and kind of the traumas we've experienced and how we view our space, essentially. So I'm not ending my project here, even though it was a student project. I'm very passionate about it. This sparked a lot of questions for me as an individual, and I probably will pursue a PhD. I don't know what the question is, but I will probably pursue a PhD along the lines of these lines of inquiry eventually. One thing, the reason why I kind of started this project was as a diasporic Malaysian, you have that diaspora like identity crisis typically, and I was like, Chinese, Malaysian, but not really. Like, why do I feel so alienated from all these identities? So I was really interested in how Malaysia became multicultural, and it became multicultural because, not only because it was a port area, but there was multiculturalism on different terms. Then I can go into a whole thing about that. That's like a whole nother story about pre-colonial multiculturalism in Malaysia. But the multiculturalism that was established, the classical Malay, Indian, Chinese formula, and etc. formula, was established by British colonial rule, emerged because of mineral deposits and of tin in Malaysia, in the peninsula, and also the cultivation of rubber. And because there was just a mineral and something to be extracted from there, the British Empire kind of this is an immigration map of the world, which is an immigration map of the world in like the mid 1800s, and obviously an immigration map of the world is basically a map of the slave trade. So this is so kind of like, because they just wanted to extract minerals out of the ground, they moved people from all over the world and shifted it and created all these kind of tricky diasporic bodies all over the world. And then now comes with this confusion of having this identity now. Now I'm kind of slightly more interested in kind of the social and legal legacy of the Malayan emergency. One thing that I've been questioning more recently is about citizenship. And one thing I came across in my research was this idea of nationality versus citizenship, and how when the Malaysian Constitution was being drafted, they wanted to say that Malaysian citizenship is non-nationality, neither could it develop into nationality. And they wanted to distinguish nationality as something that had to do with the sovereign, in that case the Sultan, because the Sultans kind of rejected the presence of Chinese people in Malaysia. And citizenship was, actually it was a word that was coined in the Roman Empire and then re-emerged for the situation in Palestine, because of the whole British thing in Palestine. So they decided that they used the word citizenship to tidy up the messiness in Palestine and decided to apply it to Malaysia as well, to kind of negotiate all these complicated multi-ethnic relations. And then back in the archives, now looking at how the Malaysian Constitution had emerged. The interesting thing about the Constitution of Malaysia was that Malaysia became independent because of the Malayan emergency. And thus, the Constitution was written during an emergency situation. And another interesting aspect of that is that during an emergency, it's a suspension of typical rule of law. It's a temporary condition to address a temporary crisis. And emergency regulations from the military regime have snuck into the Constitution of Malaysia, which is the permanently binding body. So how are we in a legacy of an emergency? And the emergency was largely fueled by racial tension. And we as Malaysians know what this means. We know what happened after that, and we can probably feel it. And as a younger generation, we're finally getting distance from this messy past and we are inheriting this messy past. So it's not only like a what's next for me, but I think it's more like what's next for us. Yeah, thanks.
Woo! Oh my god.
Crazy!
Whoa! Oh my
Amazing!
god!
Allow it!
Meaningful.
Yeah!
Yeah.
Are you gonna drop your mic? Wait.
I don't have a mic. My mic's in my laptop. Want me to drop my laptop?
Drop your teacup, drop whatever. Drop your
I have a carpet.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Come on, guys. Questions. What's next?
Brain fried until don't know what to ask.
I think it's really good. Wow. And I'm very angry at the part that when you ask your friend that they don't know what a new village is, as in we learned that from the history book, no? Yvonne, we have that in the history book.
I don't think so.
No,
we don't have it.
I thought it
Unless
was
you
small section only, like very tiny.
No.
Yeah.
What did
No,
they talk about?
not at all.
Village?
No.
Why I have a memory that I learned it from the Sejarah book. No?
Very tiny section only.
Maybe small bit. Tiny. I
you only
didn't
talk
learn
about-
any of it, obviously, because I didn't grow up in Malaysia.
And maybe you saw it on the road, because on the road there's a lot of kampong barus.
Oh, you mean on the road sign? Then how you
A lot of people told me, oh, Kampong Baru, like shopping area. I'm like, no, not the
shopping area.
Damn, my god. Like
people only say the ampang, that's only. Like only say like one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Ampang. That's why, like, yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
But how the rest of you learned about Kampong Village? And then it's like Kampong Baru.
For me, it's like from the road signs, and then I got curious. Yeah.
Oh, for your parents. Who said for your parents? Oh, so your parents live in one of the villages as well? From one of the villages as well?
Not really, but it's kind of like it's old people thing. They like to talk about the past.
Yeah.
So they bring up like what's this, what that.
Was it always like bad memories? Because it makes sense. I think
whole point is that you're not supposed to have bad memories, no?
But it's a confined camera, like you said earlier. I think my question would be like, I mean, I like the way that you actually reconstruct the entire thing based on the memories. Then you also make it a very sentimental project, I would say. But I think perhaps your answer before, perhaps my question will be like, what is your biggest takeaway though at the end of the day?
Oh, that's a good question. I have a lot of takeaways. It was a very healing process for me as a diasporic baby with an identity crisis, and it helped me settle all of those bad feelings I had before, and I'm very peaceful now. And it was interesting because this is something else I've heard from a lot of diasporic Malaysians, and I had conversations with non-diasporic Malaysians, is that diasporic Malaysians seem to have a very negative view of Malaysia. So they will always talk about, you know, the new economic policy and then how it's so shitty and unfair. And then when I researched it, I was like, no, I get the new economic policy. It's affirmative action. Maybe it wasn't done in the best way, but it's affirmative action. I get it. And then all the censorship law, my parents fed to me very like terrible stories about Malaysia. And then I've come back to them and told them like, no, like chill out. It's not that bad. And then I tell them, I show them the evidence, I present to them, and then they started to also feel more peaceful about the situation. So it is, the whole takeaway of the project is just healing from that wound that was from a very long time ago.
I find it very interesting. I think it's very similar to how like Clarissa view Malaysia right now, like after staying in Hong Kong for so long, like being somewhere away for so long and come back with a new perspective. You definitely offer more, I don't know, a more optimistic kind of view, opportunity of the country rather than scrutinizing it in the first place, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So it's and it's bizarre because I felt that like I still wouldn't go back to Malaysia because I just never and I don't speak Malay, okay? I only speak English, okay?
You don't need Malay to survive in Malaysia.
But I don't want to, okay?
Okay, I can attest to that.
Yeah. I don't want to, okay? Like I just don't want to move there. But I feel that the research that I'm doing is ethnographic, I suppose, or post-colonial, or like, you know, whatever. But it's very like, I have a lot of trajectories from the project that's not even to do with Malaysia, but more about ideas of citizenship and identity. So yeah.
Yeah, I got a question. Joey said earlier that your work was sentimental, but I don't think that maybe is the right word. I feel like for you the kind of personal relationships, the love you have in the project and with your family, and you talking about this like wound that's like kind of cuts across generations. I feel like that was an interesting kind of entry point and like a core part of your research methodology, right? And maybe could you speak a bit more about that, like the relationship between, or rather the relationships you had, and then the kind of the research methodology, and how that could go into your, like, expand into ideas of citizenship, you know, how to bring.
So actually, towards the end of the project, so I mentioned before that the reason why I picked this subject was because I became quite frustrated with how distant research was done, and how I saw a lot of people just saying bullshit and like not being held accountable. So I wanted to hold myself accountable and have people check for accuracy, basically, my work. So it was a methodology for staying disciplined. And the further I got into it, I started having conversations with my family that I never had before. And actually, towards the end, I felt that actually my family was getting more out of it than I was. They were starting to settle feelings that they had and learn about Malaysia, and you know, they started to become politically active because of this. You know, they really didn't want to go and look back towards Malaysia. And towards the end, I felt, okay, so this project, also one point of the reason why I also wanted to do Malaysia was because I knew that I wanted to migrate away permanently. And I also knew that that was following in the colonial trap of kind of brain drain, you know? Like the empire has collected me as a resource. And I wanted to say, okay, if I'm staying in the UK, how can I repatriate some of that labor and intellectual labor back? So I wanted to do something for Malaysia that would give it, or not even for Malaysia, but for home, so that I don't feel that I am being colonized once again. And towards the end, I was like, okay, so this is my final year project. In the end, I was like, this is a gift to my family for investing in my education and spending money. So yeah.
How is that not sentimental? I think it's very sentimental.
Not sentimental in the sense that they're not my memories, they're my family's memories.
Yeah,
And I
agree.
also don't like to have this danger of me as a researcher having this ego and owning this research. The research does not necessarily belong to me. The work is done by me, but the narratives and the stories, they do not belong to me whatsoever. Yeah.
Is your question answered, Kevin?
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah, actually, I really like the word, like the idea of the wound. There's a Dutch philosopher, riddled, that talks about the wound and how kind of like your work shows, you know, it's something that kind of transcends times and histories. You can, you know, really like reach people across generations.
It's an intergenerational trauma, no? Like
Yeah.
that whole idea.
And staying at home with my parents now is also like, I mean, it's like, but you know, staying at home with them, I'm learning like more stories about their past, which has like informed a lot of my thinking about the kind of protests in Hong Kong, because they're mainland Chinese but living here for a long time now, and so yeah, I can definitely resonate with.
Do you mind elaborate more on the relations that you're trying to make?
Me or?
Yeah, you.
Well, it's just like, you know, you're stuck at home, and then and I guess you need something to talk about around the dinner table, and it's just like gradually, you know, you can't keep talking about the same things. You know, we have some arguments and stuff, and like actually, especially after big arguments, like a big cathartic moment, and then we would settle down and then kind of like calm down and talk about, you know, my story, their stories, how they are similar as well, because, you know, in light of the protest, it's always like, you know, you're caught between this kind of like schizophrenic ideologies, and it's always, you know, you're always looking for differences, and that's what social media does as well. You're always like looking for differences. Or rather, you're only looking at the same thing, and then that kind of emphasizes the differences. And so kind of like the story sharing at home, I think like really allowed us to like step away from that and like look at intergenerational similarities, or also what we're kind of suffering through as well.
I see.
That's actually really interesting. Like, because one thing that I learned from this, honestly, is that because this was a project where I'm potentially sympathizing with terrorists, like they were actually terrorists, and I like to joke and say, "Oh, my, I'm a descendant of OG terrorists," like, you know, because that was the, you know, communism was the old Islamic extremism, you know, like, so an interesting thing is that my argument was never about the ideologies or what they represent. It's about this kind of political warfare and how it limits those who are casual bystanders or civilians, let's say, in this matter. And it's interesting that the only way that there could be an entry, because I'm not the only one doing Kampung Baru stuff. Like, there's a lot of young Malaysians doing it now, and like everywhere I went, people be like, why is everybody doing Kampung Baru? And I think it's because we've had enough time that people are not afraid anymore and realizing it was messed up. So in that kind of time warp, in a way, and understanding that feelings change over time, I committed myself to not acting ideologically. So even with this whole kind of Black Lives Matter thing, like, okay, I didn't go to the protest mostly for health reasons, but like, I don't go to protest because that's an act of acting ideologically. And also I have other ways of existing politically other than attending a protest. So in a way, it's like when you have that intergenerational knowledge, then you would have more wisdom when you approach such events. So you're not swept up in this current affair of the situation, which is polarizing, and you join a team where you're not a team, you're an independent, and you're a political being, and you need to do your due diligence to not take shortcuts in that way. So yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Let's strike with Tom.
I think Clarissa has a question for the archive. right, Clarissa?
No, I was just interested if you ever had the chance to do any kind of research here in Malaysia, almost like also beyond the boundaries. I know someone's doing a lot of like work on looking at the plays that they put on, the communist sympathizers, the plays that they put on, and like the kind of their way of living within this kind of contested kind of methodology. And also I know that Mark Tay, I don't know if you know his work, put on a lot of, yeah, he's a director, theater kind of practitioner who does, yeah, his whole thesis was also about it from Goldsmith. And his work is also really amazing. Like, he collects a lot of like histories and puts up plays to kind of ask people to reinterpret them as well. And I wonder if there's any like that kind of thoughts about how are you going to go next, rather than constantly mapping, trying to map what has happened.
Okay. Ooh.
Is that a cat in the background, or what was that sound?
Oh, it's construction. I'll close the window.
Oh, okay.
I also thought it was a cat.
Yeah, everyone
someone
like
dying.
The cat's dying.
It's construction. Someone is grinding something. I don't know. I don't know how it sounds like a cat. But yeah. So main reason why I don't continue right now is because I don't have money. And money equals time. So if someone pays me, or if I get a scholarship, or if I have money to put into time, I will do it. In regards to exploring further, when I went back for Chinese New Year, I went to visit as many people as I could. I went to the design archive. I went to meet some architects. I went to visited some new villages. I think I really want to look at Batang Kali more, because like it seems more original, there. But I talked to some historians and sociologists and stuff, but it's more like browsing right now. I didn't get a chance to see the archives because like
it's complicated, I heard.
It's complicated, but also like I was stuck doing Chinese New Year stuff, like I didn't have that much time because Chinese New Year is number one priority. So like
You've been to the archive, Clarissa?
Huh?
Have you been to the archive, Clarissa?
No, but my friends always say, I know Nicholas was saying it's difficult, or someone, I forgot who was it.
Yeah. But I heard it's not it's quite hard to access it. Like the British ones are so organized, the Singapore archives are so
Did you go to the Singapore ones?
No, the online version of the Singapore archive
is already good enough.
They digitize everything and you can download everything. So and my sister
for you.
My sister works for SMU, so I got her to do shit. Because she's a librarian at SMU, like a research librarian. So like she has access to things. I don't know what's next. I already spoke to someone that would supervise me. It's just I don't have money and I don't want to do a PhD yet. So,
but who supervised you with enough knowledge about Southeast Asian kind of discontents?
No. For me, it would be more about the technology side, because if I'm doing historical, it's like repeating the same thing that historians have done already. So I'm looking more at the open source investigative kind of framework more. I'm more interested in that because that's something that I can do more specifically and more in depth. And obviously the supervisor is A.R. Weitzman or Susan Schipperle from Goldsmiths, which is forensic architecture. I'm already friends with him, okay? So that's why I'm going to do it with them. So like, yeah.
Wait, hold on. So you're going to use technology to reinterpret?
Like the basically forensic architecture stuff. That's it. Like
open source
brand,
intelligence,
trademark, that kind of stuff. Because that's my teacher and I'm just going to continue my relationship with him.
That's what I learned. Is that your supervisor during masters?
Masters was Christina, which is not AL. Christina is the deputy, not the director. So
I see. But I think I think that question, I think also answers what Hazik's question is it? Is Hazik still there? I think
Hazik said yup.
I say yep. Yeah, because Hazik was asking like if you were to pursue a PhD, yada yada yada, would it be under the umbrella of architecture or history? But you just answered.
It would be research architecture. It would be Center of Research Architecture in Goldsmiths.
Yeah, that's cool.
They don't have food there, which is really boring.
How is it? How is it like the PhD in research architecture in Goldsmith?
I don't know. I haven't done it.
Or like because you know right? He's the director of the research architecture, isn't it?
Yeah.
How like what do we think about Goldsmith? Like I don't know. Like you can talk to him. I'm asking because I don't know. I'm looking.
The thing is, I've spent so much time with AI. I'm like kind of bored of him because like he talks about the same thing over and over again. So I don't know. Like it's like the whole police cordon and like like we're stepping in all this. Police cordon, blah blah blah, and then it's like it's okay, whatever. He has other things. Like he has other things as well. It's just that he always does that same lecture over and over again. It's like a forensic architecture 101, which I've heard too many times already. So yeah, I just know that. Also, I know other people. Like there's a lot of so I know someone that did the PhD there. Well, I know like 3 people actually, but I only know one of them well, and he did it like kind of parametry and like basically creating citizen satellites for Palestinians to document their land, basically to kind of make claims against the Israeli military and stuff like that. But it's like kind of, and then of course there's more research about like the kind of sociology, ethics, and politics of this specific site context. But it's also developing research for advocacy as well. So in my case, I think it's kind of like what's a really good reference of what I want to do is like, Samia Henny from Cornell. She did the same kind of thing for the counterinsurgency campaign in Algeria, and she does supervise PhD. It's just that I don't want to move to America, so that's the only reason why I wouldn't pursue a PhD there. But enough about my PhD plans. That's like my
Don't go to America. America came out.
So Tong, you are more like you want to investigate into the tools instead
Yes.
Right. Okay.
The histories, of course, is important for me because I feel it's important to develop the because I find that there's too many tech bros in the scene.
Yeah.
So like, and the tech bros don't care about what they're doing ethically.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to be a tech bro, but in fact, I feel like with all the stuff I've done, like I know how to do more than that. It's just that I don't because it's not necessary. So like, so I'm also more interested in like kind of architectural history, but using different tools to kind of investigate, and more about filling gaps in archives, basically. So yeah, I guess I don't know. Okay, I'm a little bit.
Tong, start a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
On your project.
But then if you were to fill the gaps in the archive, it's kind of like it's gonna be assumption again, right?
I don't know. Okay, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but like I don't know. I just know maybe in the future I want to continue something, but I don't know how, and I'm not in a position to figure out how yet. So like, yeah,
exciting.
If someone gives me money, then I'll tell you the answer, but I don't know the answer because I don't have money. So like,
if you go to States, because normally the PhD is funded.
Yeah, but I don't want to live there.
You can do it abroad, no?
You can do it from afar. Do it online now, man.
Oh,
you have to.
No, but okay, it's okay, whatever. I just want a few years of a normal job first, okay, before I do that.
What is normal job for you?
Yeah, what is it? I have like.
You don't do normal job, Tom.
No, I don't do normal job. That's true. No, as in like a regular. No, I'm trying to get into teaching position, like.
Where?
Academic year, okay.
Tom's want to be a normal human for a while.
So, okay, I just want to, just like let me live my life and save some money and get a dog first, okay?
Not a cat.
No, a dog.
Okay, thank you, Tong. Thank you again for the sharing and a very fun after talk. Yeah. So thank you, everyone.
Why is everybody asking me about my future? It's so weird.
Because we're concerned.
Because you talked about it.
Yeah, and then you need money. Joey can do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, if anyone has any question, if not, we're going to end the session. And thank you again, Clarissa, and thank you again, Tong, for your amazing sharing. I think it's really inspiring. Yeah, and given the background that you guys are Malaysian, but actually not living here, but then you give another perspective to us who are born and bred there. Yeah. So, yeah, lastly, for our mandatory group selfie, can I ask everyone to turn on their camera? And then we're just gonna have a quick selfie. Okay. Hi. Oh, wow, somebody just leave the group. That is so rude. That is Queenie, is it? I don't know who is Queenie. Oh, Queenie's here. Hi, sorry, not you. I think someone else.
Queenie is my friend.
Sorry.
Be nice to her.
Hi, Queenie. Nice to meet you.
Hi. She's the one who did the Duduk Rumah Artist. I don't know if you guys seen that on Facebook.
Oh no. Maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, you
anyway.
can invite her.
Yeah. So yep. So just do a selfie. So 1, 2, 3, smile. Nice. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. I love the vibe. Okay, good night. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Bye.